second life, it has 80% of the carbon footprint than a real human being. And the amount of energy that we use to power the internet is, I think now it's 3% for the networks, but it's going up quite rapidly. So it's becoming, in this point of view, a technology which is part of the problem, not part of the solution. But I would like to make still another argument, which is that networks are really part of the solution, and that is something that is really crucial to change the operating system of our world. And I think that you used that in the introduction. And so what is the operating system of our world? Very shortly, we believe that nature is infinite and that we can take everything out for our own uses without getting it back in at a level in which the Earth can regenerate itself. So right now we are at 1.5 use of the planet. And I forgot the name of the study, but you probably know what I'm talking about, when they identified 9 crucial ecosystems, and 3 of them are already being severely damaged. But even the 6 other ones are not doing well. They're also declining. So that's the first part of our DNA. The second part of our DNA says sharing is bad. If you want to share innovation, culture, science, you need to have permission or pay for it. Copyright, patents, and different things make it illegal to share, right? There's a German organization called E5 which has calculated that in terms of renewable energy, patents create a 30-year lag between the time they're invented and they can be used in the South. So this is the second part of our DNA, artificial scarcity. And the third part is we don't need social justice. Again, Oxfam has published a company to the 9 ecosystems. They have put, I think, a series of 12 social systems that are equally crucial for humanity, and 8 of them are in decline. So in terms of social equity, we're going backwards on 8 of the 12 crucial issues for mankind. So obviously, I want to give one more example. I talked with a lawyer from the Sustainable Law Development Center in San Francisco, Janelle Orsi, and she gave me a few examples. Or even in the material world, sharing is a legal activity. In about a dozen US states, you cannot dry your clothes in the sun, which is the most ecological way of drying your clothes. You cannot collect free rainwater. It's illegal. You cannot make jam and sell it to your neighbor. And you cannot have a garden in front of your house to produce food, right? These are illegal activities. And the new director of the Food and Drug Administration, which is a Monsanto guy, his priority is rooting out the production of raw milk. That's really the #1 problem in the world for these people. So obviously we need an operating system where we recognize the limits of nature, where sharing of innovation and science is encouraged, not discouraged, and where both of these things are done in a context of social equity. Okay, this is the first thing. The second important thing I want to mention, and where internet technology is really crucial, it's the change from economies of scale to economies of scope. When you move from an era of energy abundance and resource abundance to an era of energy scarcity and resource scarcity, you cannot continue with a system where competitiveness is based on economies of scale. Because what does it mean? Economies of scale mean I'm more competitive than you if I can make more of the same thing, and therefore I need more energy and more resources to make that particular thing. And this has happened before. So imagine the end of the Roman Empire, which was a crisis of extensive globalization. The cost of maintaining the empire became greater than the benefits from expansion. So no more slaves, no more gold from foreign lands. And what happened to the Roman system? It switched from economies of scale to economies of scope. It went from globalization to relocalization of agriculture into the feudal domains, right? But the second thing, and this is equally important, there was an institution called the Catholic Church, which functioned as a global open design community. The Catholic worker monks, when they were developing technologies, reinventing the plow and different things, they spread the knowledge around Europe, which functions as one cultural sphere where technological innovations were spread because of this institution and other institutions like the guilds. So this is an example of this change from economies of scale to economies of scope. So one example that I want to mention now is the example of the WikiSpeed car. You probably heard of it, and if you're not, I'll explain it very shortly. So this was a team of global engineers and designers who have developed a car in 3 months for the Automotive X Prize. This car achieves 100 miles per gallon instead of the 20 miles per gallon of Detroit. It's a car which is totally modular and can be made through a microfactory approach anywhere in the world. And it's being sold now around $29,000. And it's totally open hardware, open source hardware. Now, why is this important? Well, because the WikiSpeed car can scale up from 1. It's making on demand, right? So the economies of scope idea is that you can mutualize knowledge and mutualize physical infrastructures. So in other words, you have a global community that can work on the design in massive parallel development. And you have machinery that's being developed on a global scale, but for local manufacturing, right? So this is the new kind of internet-born system of production, which is based on relocalizing manufacturing, on global intellectual cooperation, but also on global material organization. The distributed enterprises that make the car are still connected to each other in solidarity with their open source commons, and they co-develop their knowledge base and their material infrastructure, right? So another example would be collaborative consumption. As you probably know, the average drill is used of around 6 minutes in a lifetime. In the US, it's been calculated that these companies where you can put your stuff is the equivalent of 58,000 football fields in surface. So what we're also developing in parallel with mutualizing our knowledge through open source and free software approaches is, of course, technologies which allow us to see where is the idleness, right? And we mutualize the idleness so that basically a scarcity becomes a point of view, right? Alone, I don't have a drill, but there is a drill in my community. So together, we have everything. At the same time, if we open source knowledge, alone I don't know the answer, but together in our community, that answer is available. So abundance becomes a point of view which is embedded, if you like, in the infrastructure. Now, something I think very significant happened about 2-3 weeks ago. If we think about industrial capitalism, there's different things developing, different patterns like the shareholding company and productivity increases. But the man who brought it together was Henry Ford, right? He developed the assembly line as an integration of all these different solutions. And once that was in place, then the new system of mass consumption could develop. Okay, so WikiSpeed has joined efforts with another really interesting project called Open Source Ecology, which you may know. So Marcin Jakubowski, based in Missouri with a Factor E farm, started with asking himself the question a few years ago, what are the 50 or so key technologies that a village would need to be resilient and sustainable and still have a fairly modern lifestyle? And he had this idea to develop all these machinery as open hardware. They have teamed up with WikiSpeed to create an extreme manufacturing platform, which will allow massive parallel distributed development of any part in these 50 machines on a world scale, while co-developing the machinery which allows to produce. Okay, this is not quite ready, but I'm very confident that this is going to be ready in the next few years. And I'm just saying this as an example to show you how fast these things are developing. Now let's go back to the Roman Empire, and how did change occur? Well, in my view, the change occurred because within the old decaying system, there were people, the Christians at that time, which were in cultural revolt against the system, but had created their own infrastructure so that when the Germanic warlords overrun the empire, they make an historical compromise with these structures. And that became the basis of the new feudal reality. So I think that technology, socio-technology, if you like, because it's not about technology, it's about how people use it with another form of social organization. That's the key, right? It's not a technology. The technology can be used in many different ways, but when it's coupled with a vision of the future and a new form of social organization, it's something quite different. So let's look at, what is this emerging institutional reality? How does open source production work? How does open hardware production work? Well, at the core of the value creation, you have the commons. And so I won't dwell on it because that was Silke explained it very well. I don't understand German, but I speak Dutch, so I could guess most of it. And so the core of the value creation is a shared innovation commons of knowledge, code, or design. That's where the value is created and deposited. Done by a community of contributors, which can either be volunteers or paid. That is not so important. The important thing is there is a commons which is being co-constructed and defended against privatization. The second institutional innovation of open production is the for-benefit association. If you look at almost all the open source projects, free software projects, they all have a foundation. The Apache Foundation, the Linux Foundation, the Wikimedia Foundation, the GNOME Foundation, they almost all have one. What do these foundations do? They do not command and control the production in the commons, but they empower and enable the cooperation. They protect the infrastructures of cooperation. So what these foundations are responsible for is the collective survival of the project. That's what they do. What they do not do is offer a solution to the social reproduction of the people working in the commons, right? They don't pay the people working in the commons. So that's why we have a third player, which is very important at this stage within the current political economy. It's the entrepreneurial coalition. Successful open commons create a vibrant economy around them with market players who create market value on top of the commons. The commons itself is beyond the market, right? The market requires supply and demand, tension between supply and demand, which you do not have with non-rival goods, which are deposited in the knowledge or code or design commons. So the market is not functioning in the core, but still functions at the periphery. And so I see two steps or two phases in the change. And the first phase is I would call it the distribution of everything, right? We are now building a distributed infrastructure of nearly everything. We are building a distributed infrastructure for making 3D printing, rep wraps, personal fabrication, multi-machines, the microfactory model of Wikispeed, right? Distributed making. We are making distributed financing, social lending, crowdfunding, Bitcoin as a fully distributed currency. In the P2P Foundation, we work the same way. We have a community, a commons, we have a foundation, and we have a co-op. And in the co-op, we use Bitcoin to pay part of our salaries as the first global post-Westphalian currency, which operates totally outside of the banking system and the system. It's not perfect. There are issues, but it works. And that's really a very important historical tipping point, that we know that this works, and it scales. That's very important. Because local currencies are not new, but they didn't scale. And now we have a scalable currency, so this is very important. I could go on. If you put distributed in front of something, I can show you, and this is what the P2P Foundation does. We are an observatory of these things. We have 18,000 articles on open everything, distributed everything, commons everything. Open yoga, open Ayurveda. Give me a word, I put open in front of it, and I can guarantee you it exists. People are doing it, are constructing it. So we are building this alternative economy, but it's only the first step because it still works with the DNA of the old system partially, right? If you want to make the commons sustainable today, you still need for-profit companies who pay people and create this entrepreneurial coalition, like IBM with Linux. So the question is that inevitable? Is that only something that can function within the current political me of not? And I propose 2 hacks to change this situation. The first one is based on the following idea, and it's a paradox. The more communistic your license, the more capitalist the practice. Let me explain that. The general public license says anybody can use this on the condition of, right? Anybody. So you do not have to give back to the commons in order to use the commons. So, okay, this is the situation. I believe that Dimitri Kleiner, who lives in Berlin, who calls himself a venture communist, which is probably a very rare animal, he developed a peer production license, which we also use in the P2P Foundation co-op, which says only the people who contribute to the commons can use our commons. Okay, this is controversial, especially in the free software community, but I believe if you do this, you create a natural solidarity of companies who are contributing to the commons and feel related to the commons. Now, what's the next hack? Well, the second hack is that you can create your own companies, right? The DNA of a corporation still says, let's take everything we can from the environmental and social world as low cost as possible and sell it as high as we can. So its very DNA says exploit resources. It's a legal obligation. Good people can be in a corporation, but that's what they have to do. That's what I had to do. I was 30 years in corporations, right? So there's almost so much you can do within the system when you have a DNA like that. It's the beast, you know, it's designed to be a shark. It's in the design itself. Now, when it plays with the commons, as they do, as IBM does, they can behave as a dolphin for a while, but they always have this shark DNA fighting with the dolphin DNA. So why not design companies that have dolphin DNA? Co-ops, trusts, fair trade organizations, social entrepreneurship. In other words, create a type of vehicle which is commons friendly, which doesn't have a DNA that says we should enclose the commons, but it has a DNA that says we can co-grow with the commons. And so if this would happen, these two hacks, I am convinced that we can create a counter-economy, alternative economy within the mainstream economy, which can become more and more autonomous and independent of the decaying global system. Now I need some kind of conclusion. Okay, how will this happen? So this is a kind of a little argument I have with my own Marxist past when I was in my 20s. You know, it's still there. And the question is, how do revolutions happen? How do phase transition happen? When I look at the end of the Roman Empire or the end of the feudal system, what I see happening is that within the old system, there is already a prototype of the new system. There's a proto-mode of production that is prefigurative of what is to come. And so when the old system declines, you have an exodus out of the old system, right? Once Rome could no longer get slaves, it became too expensive to buy slaves, and smart domain owners, they would free their slaves, because instead of 100 soldiers, they need 10, and people are working for themselves, etc. So that was a better deal for them, but it was also a better deal for the slaves, right? It was, in substantial ways, it was actually something that was interesting and good in many ways. So I think this is what's happening today. Today we have an exodus of young people out of the system, right? 50% unemployment in Spain. I don't even want to think about what the figure is in Greece. But overall, like, why do we have Wikispeed? Why do we have Local Motors? Why do we have all these 24 open source car projects? Well, because in Detroit, 70% of the automotive engineers don't have a job, right? So this exodus is happening. The social contract that we are now offering to young people is very clear, maybe not in Germany yet, but certainly in the other countries, very clear in Europe. You will pay more and more for your studies. It will be harder and harder to find a job, and forget about your pension, because that will get lower and lower. So this is the social contract. So I'm arguing this social system is losing legitimacy. And politically, I think we can see the first stirrings of this. You know, the Pirate Party in Germany is, for me, a really good example, because where does it come from? It comes from the Swedish file-sharing communities, right? It's a direct expression of the new culture and of the new mode of creating and sharing value. So they are the natural expression of this emergence of the digital commons. And then we have the Greens, which I consider as the historical expression of the protection of the environmental commons. Then we need some social justice forces, which are an expression of the productive commons. And maybe we need some kind of expression of the new type of ethical entrepreneurs who believe in the commons and create value with and on top of the commons. And I think this can be a basis of a global coalition of the commons, which can be a political and social force which can sustain and enable more and more social production to occur. So I think this is a good way to end. I don't know how much time I have left, because then there's room for a question or two. Oh, well, that's great. I mean, I could go on, but maybe you can have some questions.